Ow. Today's video is brought to you by the letter C for crane. That is right, we build ourselves a nice lifting device for the new shop. Welcome back to the Lost Cause Ranch. As you guys know, we have plenty of stuff around here in the new shop and plenty of things that need to get lifted. We are nearly finished setting up the new frame on the LS3 swap Defender, which means that has to come off. That has to come off. Body needs to come off the Nada, along with the box and the cab on the C10. At my 5'6" frame, I know I'm a pretty strong and capable guy, but I think we need to build ourselves a tool to help me out. So here is the start of our supplies for today's project. We got a pretty hefty I-beam. This is an extra courtesy of Ted. He had a pile of these to build a pretty cool thing for his shop. We'll show that guy in the future. This one here is gonna be in a much different use, and more of the supplies over here will give you an idea of what we got going on. We got a little electric hoist, which they say is good for 800 kilograms, which is good for lifting 1,800 pounds. That guy came with some bits and some gloves. This never happens for Joe. Joe has small hands, but these gloves barely fit Joe's small hands. Usually everything dwarfs me. I don't know. I like the flower ones better. But the first thing we need to do is size up our I-beam. This will be the top bar for our gantry crane and will be what the hoist itself rolls on. And we want this as wide as possible, but we also need to factor in the size of the shop and make sure we can still wheel it around and fit it in between the other vehicles. Is when we were, say, pulling the cab or the box off, something like the C10 in the back here, we still need the gantry crane to be able to slide through on either side of it without hitting, say, the Nada. But we also want it wide enough in case we are pulling an engine with it that we can kind of scoot in between the gantry crane and the fender so we can get to whatever we need to while lifting whatever we are lifting. The other dimension that we want to fit inside of is the garage door opening itself. That is a 12 by 12 garage door, so that makes our overall height easy to figure out. Definitely want to keep it under that height so we can roll whatever we need to right on out of the shop. Eventually, when Joe gets around to it, that whole procrastination thing, we are going to reprofile this section of the driveway, and in front of the shop we are going to be coming out level with the pad. This guy's 137, so we just need to lop 6 inches off. We'll keep the mess outside. So these 2 1/4-inch plates will be our top plates for the uprights. We're gonna put 4 holes in these, so we'll lay that out now, but we are making the uprights bolt on for 2 different reasons that we'll get into once we build the uprights. So we got options around here. Which one should we use? Now we just need to mark out our holes. We're making the uprights bolt on. And the I-beam is a little bit harder to get over to the drill press underneath the mezzanine. So I guess we'll drill these by hand. And that's no fun. A guy should buy a mag drill, you know, because I have 1 project to do with 8 holes to drill. That would make some financial sense. But we are making both our uprights bolt on for 2 reasons. And reason number 1 is in case we ever want to transport or store this thing, we can take the uprights off. The other reason is, like I said, we are making it clear the overhead door. But inside the shop here, we have 16-foot ceilings. And what I think I'm gonna do down the road is make probably a 2 or 3 foot extension that we can bolt in between the side uprights and our I-beam. In case we ever need some extra height, we'll have that ability. Future-proof. Every once in a while, I try and plan ahead. We're not gonna make that a habit though. We got Sasha double stacked on the pillows over there, looking pretty comfy, laying on some roll cage tube, and she seems all right with it. Looks like I don't have to mow the ditch this week. That should do the trick. This guy's getting pretty hot. We'll let this guy cool off before we smoke it. It's a big bolt. Got the good old China grease all over it. See all that? All right, so we got a little bit of a mess going on here. These pieces here are the trolley. That will slide on the I-beam itself with our cable hoist hanging from that. So normally we would just bolt it up, put the correct amount of spacers to get it to pinch and roll on the bottom flange of the I-beam, and use this hook plate, that guy right there, to hang the chain hoist from. That works nicely on something like this style chain hoist that has a center hook, but the one we are using here does not have a center hook. It is designed to hang with these clamps here, which would go over a piece of tube, and it would hang from those. With this style, we can't run a single hook. We got a motor hanging off the one side, and the cable will wind back and forth, so therefore it would never be balanced because the load would change within this 4-inch window there and make it go all cattywampus. If you look at like this manual chain hoist here, the chain always hangs directly underneath the hook. It does not go side to side. But I think the way we're gonna handle this, we're gonna drill this out and have 2 bolts go straight through in addition to this big one. If we center it up over here, should keep that from flopping back and forth. So I think what we're gonna do here first is kind of set these on the beam and grab a measurement in between so we can roughly set up our washer requirement on our big center bolt. So depending on how we stack these, this will pinch and keep the trolley from being able to spread and pop off the I-beam, because it falling off the I-beam is less than ideal. Once again, this is probably a 2-person job, but we'll just wing it, make do. That's why we got a hip. We'll go with 6 3/4 and try that. That's nice. Now we just need to figure out a way to hang our chain hoist below. So what I'm thinking here is 2 holes, one around here, one around here, with a bolt that goes through, weld some tabs onto that square tube and hang it from there. So essentially we'll weld an ear with a bolt hole and an ear with a bolt hole on each side of this tube, run a bolt through there and pinch everything together, and that should hang something like this in our little setup. May as well throw that. So I think we're gonna start off with the hoist being centered, well, not centered, offset at about that. So what we'll do is mark this right along there. And then we can butt our little eyelet right like that. Sasha is soaking up the end of the nice days. It is the end of October and it is 75 degrees out. Somebody is just freaking loving it. This is 100% the correct way of doing things. We're just gonna transfer our holes over so everything matches up. So now we just gotta punch those holes out, match those holes. We're doing that as we let this thing cool down. We need to weld the other side on, but it is too hot to handle right now. I could put thicker gloves on. Gotta turn the welder on. It's amazing how much better it works when the power's on. She is freaking comical on how she chooses to lay around. Don't want to use the whole pillow. We got our little hanging thing all welded up. And what I want to know, does anyone know how to get rid of these freaking things? Little stink bugs. I don't know what it is about this year, but I've never had so many of these guys. I got them all over the shop and all over the house. Look at on the mill here. They like to hang out in crevices. So if you have a solution for that, let me know. I'd be forever grateful. So we went ahead and picked up our uprights. We have the legs in the back of the LR4. And they're not exactly light. These are much lighter. All right, so this thing is gonna be fairly stout for what we're actually gonna use it for. These two long ones are our uprights, and those are 4x4 square 1/4 inch wall. Then we got some 2x4 rectangle to match, and this is gonna be our horizontal piece at the floor that our casters mount to. The short one is to the correct length. We just need to chop the other one down, make them match. So on these legs, our casters are just gonna bolt right through the tube, mark our holes. And guess what we get to do now? My favorite thing, more drilling. Well, at least I think those were the last holes of the project. Should have bought that mag drill for drilling a 7/16 hole. Nope, didn't need to. We'll explain this mess in a future video. Like I've always said, I'm the dumbest person I know. Still holds true. We need to buzz some things together. So let's go grab the big MIG out and bring it to where we actually have some room. Why do I do this to myself? Ladder's there. All right, and what we're gonna do is move our tube to this side of the shop. And the reason for that is from this relief cut in the concrete towards the back of the shop, the concrete is perfectly flat, or almost perfectly flat. Much easier to weld our leg on. Or what do you call this, a foot? Is this a leg? And this a foot? Before we weld this side, we're gonna set the other one on top, get that all tacked together. If we were to weld it, the weld would be raised a little bit, but this way, they'll both match. Make sure it's still square. The big 220 MIG sure does a nice job of gluing the thicker steel together. We're gonna make a couple supports now. Don't want nothing teetering. It'd be less than ideal if this just, if this whole thing just collapsed. And here we get our first look at the scale of this thing. We obviously have some clearance between it and the ceiling, but that guy's a pretty tall boy. Fit up on this guy turned out pretty nice. And down there flush. You know, if a guy just had some sort of device that was meant for lifting heavy things, this would be easier. Maybe I'll have one soon. This one doesn't want to seem to balance. That's not sketchy at all. Need the ground hook back up. Works much better. And now I just need to figure out how to get these outside so we can paint them. Did I mention they're heavy? A guy should really get something to lift heavy things. It would be a great idea. We're calling an audible. Getting tired of lifting stuff. It's not because I'm weak or anything. I just don't feel like doing it anymore. Not because I can't. That there is one heck of a paint booth. This one apparently wasn't invited to the party. Well, the good news is I got some paint on the steel and not just my hand. But we got these guys painted. Now we need to get creative and figure out how to get this thing assembled. Per the norm, we are flying solo. And none of this stuff got any lighter yet. So we'll figure something out. I think I got bolting the I-beam to the top figured out, in my head at least, but I haven't quite sorted out tipping it upright. Of course, Joe wedges the 2x4 underneath so we can't lift it up. Like this hasn't been enough work already. Ow. Love when you punch yourself in the face. Smooth move. So here's the current situation. Went ahead and put the casters on one side. Figured we'll leave them off that end. We're gonna have to tip this somehow, and not having wheels on the bottom is probably gonna be beneficial. It'd be real nice if a guy had something like a gantry crane, because we could probably lift it up with that, but we don't. So I'm up for suggestions on how we should do this. Currently thinking maybe snatch block off the truss above and using the winch on the LR4 and lifting it up that way. Not exactly a fan on where we'd have to put the snatch block though. Be on kind of an open span. But I think what I'm gonna do is sleep on it. It's a late enough night. For once, I'm gonna use my brain and stop while I'm ahead and not be the dumbest person I know and screw up lifting it while tired. All right, it is raining out, so you're gonna have to bear with me on the noise for a second. But here is our little Rube Goldberg type project. We got the winch hooked up to the I-beam from the Land Rover. We threw a couple rubber floor mats underneath the legs, and we're gonna try and do a little Yankee yank and see if we can get it to start tipping up. Like I said, I'd rather not hang off the truss. Shockingly, it just slides. I'm gonna keep trying to step it up with random things. We just need to get it tilted enough to where it wants to start pulling the top over instead of sliding it. This is not sketchy at all. Definitely the correct way to do this. So here we are. I'm just contemplating life right now. We got a bunch of stuff around, so just trying to rack my brain on what stuff to use to make this happen. We'll find a way. So I think we can officially give up on trying to tip it without going off the truss. Went ahead and strapped the lower legs to the back wall, so when we were pulling with the LR4, it wouldn't just slide towards us. So, yeah, throw this away. All right, I kind of knew this is probably what I should have did in the first place, but we have winch, snatch block off the truss, down to the top I-beam. I was kind of trying to avoid pulling on the truss, but in all reality, it's probably only a 200 or 300 pound load, so it's not the end of the world. And we have touchdown. So what does Joe do? We waste a couple hours dicking around trying to do it a different way than the way I knew I should have. Sounds about right. And just to show you how much actual weight is on there, not much. This just keeps getting more and more interesting. See, occasionally I am safe. We did a little safety strap on the trolley so it wouldn't flop off while we were tipping that guy up. I love it when a plan comes together. So this is exactly what I had in mind when I set out to build the gantry crane for the shop. This is obviously going to be a super useful tool to be lifting things like the cab and the box, the cab and the box, the cab and the box. As you know, I'm strong, but I'm not that strong. But the one thing about a gantry crane is it eats up a lot of room, and this was our solution to not being a ton of wasted space while not being used. The legs do stick out a little bit, but not much past that desk. And speaking of the desk, I think we need to refinish that guy. Match. But that realistically is pretty minimal. I wish I had longer arms. This is almost a two-person job to do this efficiently, but we can make it happen. That thing rolls freaking smooth. With swivels on all four casters, we'll be able to move this guy throughout my disaster of a shop. I haven't quite figured out what I'm gonna do for cable management yet, but let's give this guy a try. All right, here goes nothing. This guy is right at about 1,000 pounds. We're gonna call that a success. That right there is super cool. We have our little Amazon hoist, and that is pretty frickin' money right there. This thing is a hunk of steel. The speed is nice and controlled. And we have casters rated for 4,000 pounds. So even with a load, we can wheel this guy around. Super excited because we obviously have a lot of stuff to move in here, and it is gonna make tearing the LS3 swap Defender back down to the frame to finish that off much easier. That, and I can probably buy more things now. We probably shouldn't do that. Look at how excited Sasha is over this. You wanna go on the amusement ride? But with that being said, appreciate you guys watching. Appreciate you subscribing. This was a fun one to build. And more tools in the shop are always a good thing, especially when you can build them yourself. We'll catch you guys on the next one. We'll be back on the little Defender.